The moment the road stopped, the road stretched long and pale beneath the afternoon sun, its dust rising in soft clouds with every steady hoofbeat. Heat shimmered across the open land, blurring the edges of wooden cabins and distant fences. It was the kind of silence that pressed gently against the ears, peaceful, but never empty. Tawa rode at the front, his posture upright, his hands steady on the reins. His dark horse moved with quiet strength, each step measured and calm. From a distance, he appeared unshaken, a man who belonged to the land beneath him. But closer, there was a stiffness in his shoulders, a tension that had nothing to do with the journey. Behind him, Nita sat lightly, one hand resting against his arm. Her presence was warm, trusting, her body leaning into his as though she had already built a future in that simple closeness. She watched the passing homestead with curious eyes, taking in the slow rhythm of village life. The hens pecking at the dirt, the faint creak of wood in the breeze, the distant hum of quiet labor. "You've been quiet," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the sound of hooves. Tawa didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed ahead, as if the road demanded all his attention. After a moment, he gave a slight nod, not quite an answer, not quite an acknowledgement. Nita studied him, her expression shifting with subtle concern. She had come to recognize his silences, though she did not yet understand them. To her, he was steady, dependable, a man carved from something unbreakable. Yet there were moments, like this one, when he seemed far away, as if part of him still lingered somewhere behind them. The horse slowed as they approached the cluster of cabins. The air here felt heavier, thick with the scent of wood smoke and dry earth. Life moved at a deliberate pace, untouched by urgency. It was a place where nothing was hidden for long. Tawa's grip on the reins tightened. At first, it was only a figure at the edge of the road, small, almost unnoticeable against the pale ground. But as they drew closer, the shape sharpened into something unmistakable. A woman. She walked slowly, her steps careful, deliberate. In her arms, she carried a bundle of firewood, held close against her body. Her dress was simple, worn by time and work, the fabric gathering around her form in a way that revealed what could not be hidden. She was pregnant. Tawa's breath caught, though no sound escaped him. The world seemed to narrow, the distant noises fading into a dull hum. Even the horse sensed the shift, its pace faltering as if responding to something unseen. Aponi. Her name did not pass his lips, but it struck through him with the force of memory. He had not expected to see her here. Not like this, not so suddenly. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined her, if the heat and distance had played a trick on his eyes. But she was real. Closer now, her features became clear, the quiet strength in her face, the calm that never quite concealed what lay beneath. She had not changed in the ways that mattered. If anything, she seemed more grounded, as though hardship had shaped her into something steadier. She noticed him. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. Her steps slowed, just for a fraction of a second. Her gaze lifted, meeting his for the briefest moment. There was no shock in her eyes, no outward sign of surprise. Only recognition. And then, just as quickly, she looked away. Tawa's hands tightened further on the reins. The horse came to a complete stop, dust settling around its hooves. He did not realize he had halted until the silence pressed in fully, until the absence of movement became impossible to ignore. Aponi did not stop walking. She adjusted the weight of the firewood in her arms, her movements controlled, efficient. There was no hesitation, no outward acknowledgement of what stood before her. If her heart had shifted, if her breath had faltered, she did not allow it to show. That restraint cut deeper than any words. Behind him, Nita straightened slightly, sensing the abrupt change. Her hand tightened against his arm, her earlier warmth replaced by a quiet uncertainty. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Tawa didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed on Aponi as she moved past them, each step measured, each breath deliberate. The distance between them closed and then began to widen again, yet he felt no release from the weight that had settled inside him. Nita followed his line of sight. She saw the woman, the bundle of wood, the slow, careful walk. And then she saw more. The curve of the woman's body, the unmistakable sign of a life growing within her. Something shifted in her expression. "Who is she?" Nita asked, her voice quieter now, edged with something sharper than curiosity. Tawa's jaw tightened. The answer sat heavy in his chest, pressing against the silence he had built so carefully around himself. It was not a question he could dismiss, not one he could outrun. Not anymore. Ahead of them, Aponi continued walking, her figure growing smaller with each step. She did not look back. Tawa finally exhaled, though it brought him no relief. The road, once so certain, no longer stretched forward in the same way. It had stopped, right here in this moment, and whatever lay beyond it would demand something he could no longer avoid. But still he said nothing. What was left behind? The silence that followed lingered long after Aponi disappeared down the road. Dust settled slowly, as if reluctant to disturb what had just passed. Tawa remained motionless on the horse, his gaze fixed on the empty space where she had been, as though the past had taken form and walked away again. Nita shifted behind him, her earlier ease replaced by a growing unease. She watched his stillness, the way his body had tightened without explanation, the way his silence now carried weight instead of calm. "You know her," she said, not as a question, but as a quiet certainty. Tawa closed his eyes briefly, as if the truth might soften if he delayed it. But it did not. It only pressed harder against him, demanding to be faced. "I did," he replied at last, his voice low, stripped of anything unnecessary. Nita leaned back slightly, studying him. "Did?" she repeated. That didn't look like something finished. He exhaled slowly, his grip loosening on the reins though his posture remained rigid. The road ahead no longer held his attention. His thoughts had already turned backward, pulled into a time he had tried to leave untouched. "It wasn't supposed to follow me here," he said. Nita frowned. What wasn't? But Tawa did not answer immediately. His silence shifted again, not avoidance this time, but recollection. The present began to blur at its edges, replaced by memory that felt sharper than the moment he stood in. There had been a time when the road had led only to a pony. He remembered the quiet mornings, when the air was still cool and the light came slowly over the land. Aponi would already be awake, her hands busy with small, necessary tasks, her movements steady and unhurried. She spoke little, but she did not need to. There had been an understanding between them that lived in shared glances and simple routines. She had been strong in ways that required no display. Where he was restless, she was grounded. Where he questioned, she endured. Their lives had not been grand, but they had been certain, at least for a while. "I was with her," Tawa said, the words coming without decoration. "Before." Nita's expression tightened, though she said nothing yet. Tawa continued, his voice distant, as if he were speaking from within the memory itself. "We built something simple. It should have been enough. Should have been." Nita pressed. He nodded faintly. "It was, until it wasn't." The change had not come all at once. It had crept in quietly, like a shadow lengthening at the end of the day. Responsibilities grew heavier. Days began to repeat, and something inside him, something he could not name, began to resist the stillness. Aponi had noticed, though she never confronted him directly. She would pause in her work, watching him with that same steady gaze, as if waiting for him to speak the truth himself. But he never did. "I started to feel like I was standing still," he admitted, "like the world was moving somewhere else without me." Nita's voice softened, though it carried an edge. "And you thought leaving her would change that?" Tawa's jaw tightened. "I didn't leave right away." He remembered the moment Nita entered his life, not as disruption, but as contrast. She had moved differently, spoken differently, carried a lightness that felt foreign to him. Where Aponi was quiet strength, Nita was motion, laughter, unpredictability. It had drawn him in before he understood what it meant. At first, it was nothing, he said. Just conversation. A distraction. Nita looked away briefly, as if the word itself unsettled her. But distractions don't stay small, Tawa continued. Not when you let them grow. The shift had been gradual, but undeniable. He began to seek out those moments, to linger where he once would have left. The silence he shared with Aponi became heavier, filled with things unsaid. And still, he chose not to break it. You didn't tell her, Nita said quietly. Tawa shook his head. The memory of Aponi in those days remained sharp, the way she moved with the same steady rhythm, even as the space between them widened. She had not accused him. She had not demanded answers. But there had been a knowing in her silence, something deeper than words. She understood before I said anything, he admitted. Maybe before I even understood it myself. Nita's voice lowered. And you still left. Yes. The word came without hesitation, though it carried more weight than anything he had said before. I told myself it was better that way, he continued. Cleaner. Like walking away would make it less of a betrayal. Nita let out a quiet breath. But it didn't. No, Tawa said. It didn't. He remembered the last time he saw Aponi before today. She had stood in the doorway of their home, her expression calm, her posture unbroken. She had not asked him to stay. She had not tried to stop him. That had been the hardest part. I thought leaving would end it, he said. That distance would erase what I had done. Nita's gaze returned to him, steady now, searching. But she's still here. Tawa nodded slowly. And so is everything I left behind. The road stretched before them once more, but it no longer felt like escape. It felt like a line drawn between who he had been and who he had chosen to become. And the cost of that choice now stood undeniable. Behind him, Nita's hand slipped away from his arm. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, she asked, her voice quieter than before, Does she know about me? Tawa did not turn to face her. Yes, he said. The words settled heavily between them, carrying more than its simple meaning. For the first time since they had stopped, Tawa nudged the horse forward. It moved slowly, as if uncertain of the path ahead. But now, there was no illusion left in the journey. Only consequence. The weight of truth. The horse moved only a few paces before Tawa pulled the reins again. This time, the stop was not sudden. It came with a quiet finality, as though something within him had reached its limit. The road ahead no longer called to him. It waited, indifferent, offering distance but no relief. Behind him, Nita shifted, her balance adjusting as the horse stilled once more. The space between them, once filled with warmth, had grown strained and uncertain. Why are we stopping again? She asked, though her voice carried less impatience than before. There was caution in it now, as if she already feared the answer. Tawa did not respond immediately. His gaze drifted to the path behind them. The same path Aponi had taken, her figure now gone from sight, but not from thought. The image of her lingered with sharp clarity. The steady steps, the quiet endurance, the unmistakable curve of her body. He exhaled slowly. I can't leave it like this, he said. Nita's fingers curled slightly against the fabric of her dress. Leave what? Tawa turned his head, just enough to meet her eyes for the first time since they had stopped. There was no distance in his expression now, no attempt to hide behind silence. Only something heavier, something settled. He said. The word hung between them, simple and unyielding. Nita's gaze hardened, though not with anger. Yet. You already did, she replied. You said that yourself. Tawa shook his head. Not like this. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind stirred faintly, lifting dust in soft spirals around them. It carried no comfort, only the reminder that time was moving whether they chose to or not. Then, without another word, Tawa swung his leg over and dismounted. His boots met the ground with a dull, grounded thud. It was a small action, but it shifted something fundamental. He was no longer above the moment, no longer carried forward by the horse's steady rhythm. Now he stood within it. Nita watched him, her expression tightening. What are you doing? I'm going back, he said. Her breath caught. Back, she repeated, as if the word itself was foreign. Tawa nodded once, his decision already made. Nita slid down from the horse as well, her movement sharper, less controlled. You're just going to turn around? She asked. After everything you told me? He did not answer right away. Instead, he reached for the reins, tying them loosely to a nearby post. His focus remained steady, deliberate. "She deserves more than silence," he said. Nita let out a short, disbelieving breath. "And what about me?" The question struck cleanly, cutting through the space he had tried to hold steady. Tawa paused. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face, not about what he had done, but about what he had allowed to grow from it. "You deserve the truth," he said. From the beginning, Nita stared at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to find something that still belonged to her. "And now," she asked, "what do I deserve now?" Tawa did not step closer. He did not reach for her. "I don't know if I can give you anything honest while I'm still running from what I left behind," he admitted. The words were steady, but they carried no comfort. Nita's expression shifted, the hurt no longer hidden. "So I was just what?" she pressed. "A way out." Tawa's jaw tightened. "You were real," he said, "but what I brought into it wasn't." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Nita turned away briefly, her hands pressing against her temples as if to steady herself. The world she had stepped into, the certainty she had believed in, was unraveling piece by piece, and there was no clear place to stand. "You should have told me," she said quietly. "I should have told her," Tawa replied. The correction landed harder than he intended. Nita's head snapped back toward him. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're choosing her?" Tawa held her gaze, not with defiance, but with a clarity that had been missing until now. "I'm choosing to face what I did," he said. "Whatever that means." Nita's lips parted, but no words came immediately. The answer she wanted was not the one he had given, and the one he had given left no space for misunderstanding. Behind them, the road remained open, stretching forward into distance and possibility. But neither of them looked at it now. Instead, all attention turned to what lay behind. Nita's shoulders slowly lowered, the tension in her body shifting into something quieter, more resolved. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. "If you go back," she said, "you don't come forward with me again." It was not a demand. It was a boundary. Tawa nodded once. "I know." The simplicity of his acceptance made the moment sharper. For a long second, they stood facing one another, two people bound by something that had never been whole to begin with, now forced to see it clearly. Then Nita stepped back. She did not reach for him. She did not try to stop him. "Then go," she said. Tawa did not hesitate. He turned, his steps steady as he began to walk back down the path they had just traveled. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of doubt, but because of understanding. The distance between him and the place he had left behind was no longer something he could ignore. Behind him, Nita remained where she was, her figure still against the quiet landscape. Neither of them looked back. Ahead, somewhere beyond the curve of the road, Aponi walked alone, carrying more than firewood, carrying everything he had chosen to abandon. And now, for the first time, he was going to meet it. What remains unspoken? The road felt longer on foot. Each step Tawa took pressed the past more firmly into the present, as though the ground itself refused to let him forget where he had once stood. The dust no longer rose lightly beneath him. It clung, settling into the creases of his clothes, marking his return not as movement, but as reckoning. Ahead, Aponi came back into view. She had not gone far. Her pace remained steady, her posture unchanged despite the weight she carried. The bundle of firewood rested against her arms, held with quiet endurance. She did not look back, but something in the stillness of her shoulders suggested she knew he was there. Tawa slowed as he approached, the distance between them shrinking until it could no longer be ignored. Aponi, her name left his mouth carefully, as if it required permission. She stopped. For a moment, she did not turn. The silence stretched, thin but unbroken, filled with everything that had been left unsaid. Then, with measured control, she shifted her weight and faced him. Her expression was calm, not cold, not welcoming, simply composed, as though emotion had been shaped into something quieter, something that could endure without breaking. "You came back," she said. It was not surprise. It was acknowledgement. Tawa nodded, though the gesture felt insufficient. "I had to," Aponi adjusted her grip on the firewood, her movements deliberate. You didn't have to, she replied. You chose to. The distinction settled between them, sharp and undeniable. Tawa stepped closer, but not too close. The space between them remained, a silent measure of everything that had changed. I should have come back sooner, he said. Aponi's gaze held his, steady and unwavering. For what? The question was simple, but it carried weight. Tawa hesitated, not because he lacked an answer, but because none of them felt complete. Apology, explanation, regret. Each one seemed smaller when faced with the reality before him. For you, he said finally. For this. His eyes flickered briefly toward her, toward the life she carried so visibly now. Aponi followed his gaze, her hand instinctively shifting slightly against her side. When she looked back at him, nothing in her expression had softened. This didn't start today, she said. I know, and it didn't stop when you left. Her voice remained even, but the meaning beneath it pressed harder than raised tones ever could. Tawa lowered his eyes for a moment, the truth settling fully into place. I know that too. Aponi studied him, as if weighing the sincerity of words that had come too late. Then why are you here now? She asked. He met her gaze again, this time without hesitation. Because I didn't understand what leaving meant, he said. Not until I saw you. Aponi's expression shifted, barely, but enough to reveal something deeper beneath the surface. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. You understood, she said quietly. You just didn't stay. The words landed cleanly. Tawa nodded once. You're right. There was no defense in his voice, no attempt to reshape the past into something easier to bear. Only acceptance. The silence that followed was different now. Not empty, but full. It held the weight of choices already made and the uncertainty of what could come next. Aponi shifted slightly, the strain of standing beginning to show despite her effort to conceal it. Without thinking, Tawa stepped forward. Let me take that, he said, gesturing toward the firewood. Aponi's grip tightened instinctively. For a moment, it seemed she might refuse, but then her arms lowered just enough to release the bundle into his hands. The transfer was brief, but it carried more than the weight of wood. Tawa adjusted it against his own arms, feeling the rough edges press into his skin. It was heavier than he expected, not because of the wood itself, but because of what it represented. I can carry it, he said. Aponi nodded once. You should have been carrying it before. Again, no anger, only truth. They began to walk, not side by side at first, but close enough that the distance no longer felt like separation. Their steps were slow, measured, adjusting to one another without needing to speak. For a while, neither of them said anything. The village came into view ahead, unchanged in its quiet rhythm. Life continued, indifferent to the shift taking place on the road, just beyond it. Finally, Aponi spoke again. She's gone, she asked. Tawa did not pretend to misunderstand. Yes. Aponi absorbed the answer without visible reaction. And you came back because of that. Tawa shook his head. No, I came back because I should never have left like that. The difference mattered. Aponi glanced at him briefly, then forward again. You can't undo what's already been done. I'm not trying to, he said. I'm trying to stand where I should have stayed. Her steps slowed slightly, as if the words required more attention than she wanted to give. And what does that mean? She asked. Tawa tightened his hold on the firewood, grounding himself in the weight of it. It means I don't walk away again, he said. Not from you. Not from this. Aponi stopped. This time, the pause felt heavier than any before it. She turned to face him fully, her expression no longer guarded, but searching, measuring the distance between what he said and what he would do. You don't get to decide that alone, she said. Tawa nodded. I know. The honesty in his voice left no room for argument. For a long moment, they stood there, the past and present meeting in a space neither of them could control. There was no resolution waiting, no simple path forward, only the possibility of something different, something slower, harder, and uncertain. Aponi finally turned again, her steps resuming toward the village. Tawa followed, the weight in his arms steady, the silence between them no longer empty. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation, but it was not an ending either. And for the first time, that was enough to keep walking.